And we'll start by a short meditation to arrive here in the present, cut out distraction. And we do that by first putting our attention on the breath, feeling the movement of the breath going through our body. Our body is straight but relaxed. And once the attention has settled with the breath in the present moment, then we let go even of the breath, paying attention to the breath, but then we tune into the background, meaning opening up to the space, to the background. You can use the sounds, feeling the sounds, hearing the sounds in order to just open up the awareness and stay with this open, undistracted mind. Bing. And within this very open, undistracted, relaxed mind, we form the intention, or we remind ourselves of our intention, which in the Mahayana is the intention to follow these teachings, contemplate them, meditate on them, with the goal of reaching awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings, so that we will be able to help others advance on their spiritual path towards awakening. All right, thank you. These kinds of meditations, of course, it is always good to let these thoughts settle in, but if you feel like you don't have time, that is not a reason not to do them. You can, throughout the day, remind yourself of your intention. As a Mahayana practitioner, actually, with everything we do, whether we study, whether we read something, whether we prepare food, it is always enhanced by this intention of doing it for the benefit of beings. And there are actually there are detailed instructions, some of them we will get from Gampopa, how every activity can be accompanied by thoughts that turn this activity from an ordinary one into a reminder for awakening. You know, it goes as far as when you walk up the stairs, you are thinking, I'm walking up the stairs to the higher realms, leaving behind the lower realms. That stands for, you know, domains of negative action are the lower realms that we leave behind, and climbing up means to a way of living that is supported by virtue. That is one way of thinking. When you close the door, you think, I'm closing the door to the lower realms, and I'm walking towards, you know, awakening. When I put on clothes, especially for the robes, for the monastic robes, you have these instructions. I'm putting on the robes of virtue and discipline. So every ordinary action can be turned into a training And here today we are talking about compassion training. In a way, bodhicitta training, compassion training, it is all connected. And one of the points that I wanted to make in the readings for today is that, I said it yesterday already, yeah, all these single techniques that we can find in the Buddhist teachings, if they stay on the level of a technique, they don't go very far. One really has to think of developing a compassion culture, turning one's whole life into a path towards awakening, towards compassion. And then all these elements, they gain their strength from having this very profound view and very strong intention. And I wanted to make one more remark, talking about compassion training. Now, every day we are reciting this second prayer, Semchen Tamche, and so on. And I pointed that out in the first lecture. These are actually kind of repetitions, trainings to remember what is loving kindness, what is compassion. The first prayer, may all beings possess happiness and the cause of happiness, that is the training in loving kindness. Because in Buddhist understanding, love and loving kindness means wishing the other one to be happy and to have the causes of happiness. Yeah? And we mentioned that just shortly. The causes of happiness is virtuous deeds, virtuous thinking and deeds. Wishing somebody else happiness, that is the definition of love, loving kindness, yeah? And ordinarily, especially when we're in a relationship, of course we wish the other person to be happy. But there's always an attachment part in it. It's like in bracket, it's written, I wish you to be happy, in brackets, with me. And when they decide to be happy with somebody else or without me, the wish doesn't come as easily anymore. So here the Bodhisattva just takes him or herself out of the equation. You can still wish the other wholeheartedly to be happy, even if it is not with you, with me. And the second line, may they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. That is the definition for compassion, yeah? Wishing the other one to be free from suffering, from pain, and that can be the visible suffering of somebody who really is struck by disease, by misfortune, and so on. But as we also touched upon, in Buddhist understanding, suffering has different forms. Even being outwardly happy is seen as a suffering because it will go away. Yeah, even if you're rich, have a super relationship, have the best job, it ends. If a person is lucky enough that it ends until death, that it ends only with death, so that the whole life was happy, still it ends. Yeah, so therefore, a bodhisattva has this long-term view. And therefore also has compassion for such a person, because one day they will have to face loss, and that is painful. We wish them to be free from pain and suffering and the cause of suffering. So the causes, again, those are negative actions, negative patterns of thinking, and that can be subtle jealousy. You have that often in the teachings of Buddhism. It is not the jealousy that we use, I think, ordinarily. At least when I first heard it, I was surprised. What jealousy? I always apply that only in these relationship things, yeah, when my partner is flirting with somebody else, that causes jealousy. In Buddhism, it is much more than that. Jealousy means the absence of rejoicing. The absence, if you're not able to feel happy that somebody else is feeling happy or has the praise of others, is successful, and so on. Yeah, and Lama Gendun, our retreat teacher, had a very nice way of explaining how you discover that you are jealous, which was if somebody is coming in the room and without any reason at all, you feel like a twist in your stomach, then you have jealousy. Yeah, because there is something where you just can't rejoice in the presence of that person, and sometimes really no good reason at all. Sometimes there might be a reason, but anyway, this indication that you weren't provoked, but you can't really be happy about the presence of that person, tells you there's something to work on. Yeah, and that is actually what it is said here in the third line, where we wish that person and everybody else and all beings, actually not only humans, may they never be separated from supreme happiness devoid of suffering. It's maybe not so obvious in the reading, in the wording here, but this is saying, I wish everyone to be happy and joyful, and I rejoice with them. Rejoicing with other people's happiness is actually the easiest way to accumulate merit, Lama Gendun said, because you are developing positive mind states and you didn't have to do anything for it. If somebody else is fortunate, worked very hard for it, here, all the people who worked on developing Gomde to this wonderful place that it is, even if you didn't do anything to contribute to that, rejoicing, you participate in the merit of the place. Yeah. So that is for the lazy bodhisattva. And then the last verse, that is the practice of equanimity. And here it is expressed by saying, may beings, and that includes ourselves, remain in boundless equanimity beyond attachment and aversion to those near and far. This addresses the fact that more easily we have love and compassion for the ones who are close to us, the in-group, and those who do not belong to that, the out-group. Either we are indifferent to them or we even have aversion to them. Here we are being told, as long as our mind functions in this divisive way, we have not attained the love and compassion and the mind state of a bodhisattva. The mind state of a bodhisattva does not make distinctions between near and far. And yesterday, with the teachings of Shantideva, we got introduced to the mind of a bodhisattva. That's what I called unbearable or radical compassion, because it is radical. So therefore, we had afterwards in the afternoon, we had these discussions about boundaries or how much can we practice this. We have to keep in mind those mind states that are described by Shantideva are really for advanced bodhisattvas and Buddhas. We can use them as torches that show us the light, that show us the way. If we don't feel we are there, and I mean, I can say I'm not there, that I see everybody exactly the same as me. Yeah, that is what Shantideva tells us. Self and other, there's no difference. However, I take it as an aspiration. Sometimes I'm approaching that view, and sometimes I also feel like, okay, this is too much today, I'm tired, and give me a break. So boundaries, of course, we all deal with boundaries, but the discussion yesterday was about questioning that, and that is the first step to sometimes opening up. What we will see today with the practice of Tonglen, of giving and taking, and as you probably already know, taking means taking in the suffering of others. First of all, it is not really that you will take anybody's suffering and then be struck by COVID or a broken foot or whatever other people might have. It is first of all working with the own mind and allowing the possibility of having a little bit more discomfort, yeah? Allowing the mind to become tender and soft and vulnerable, whereas normally we instinctively don't want that opening, yeah, because we are afraid. So it is first of all a meditation and an exercise, and we should not be worried too much about the fact that what is described there is not completely what we live every day in our life or in our profession. Okay, are there questions or comments from yesterday, from our meditation in the afternoon or discussion? If nothing is on your mind, we'll continue here. Actually, here Okay. Generally speaking, in the Mahayana Buddhist teachings, Mahayana, the great vehicle, the vehicle of universal compassion, we can analyze them, these techniques, into 3 approaches. And this is something that I came up with, other Buddhist scholars came up with. It's not a way that the traditional teachers will present you the trainings. What I identified is that you have some meditations, contemplations that are a cognitive analytical approach, some that are a deconstructive approach, and some that are a constructive approach. And without knowing it, you are doing all 3 of them when you practice the Bodhisattva path. What is the cognitive analytical approach? That is simply thinking about certain concepts that allow us to think, oh, it is reasonable to meditate on something like exchanging self and other. Yeah, so any kind of analysis, any kind of cognitive approach is part of that. And we did it yesterday by starting to think about the fact that actually, when we think about it, there is no difference on a certain level between self and other. In which way is there no difference? Shantideva told us, in joy and sorrow, we are all the same. Yeah, every single one of us, we try to design our lives in a way that we find some kind of satisfaction and happiness and avoid what makes us suffer. Of course, we all have different ideas about what it is that gives us contentment and what is the pain and discomfort that we want to get rid of. But this basic mechanism, that is what we share with all. And therefore, there is something where we can connect with others. And Shantideva invites us to think about this deeply, because it undermines all kinds of differentiations that we make, thinking of others are other. And he explains in various different ways how having these distinctions between self and other just leads to more ignorance and more suffering in the long way. So this kind of analytical approach, everything that we did in the first week, all goes into the first category. The second category, we also talked about the deconstructive approach. Deconstruction here means taking away. And what do we take away? Anything that covers the jewel. Yeah, we just heard about it. Our Buddha nature jewel of mind, whatever is covering it, and that is negativity, ignorance, and so on, that has to be deconstructed. And there also, Shantideva gave some instructions. For him, the radical approach is get rid of self-clinging, of ego-clinging, very easy. If you get rid of this mistaken idea of an independently existing self, then everything else will flow from it and your problems will be solved. Yeah, if through the realization that there is no identity that exists independently of anything else, there is no, for me, there's no Julia-ness. I'm made up of my parents, my friends, the conditions of my life, everything, my teachers that brought me together. And temporarily I'm here right now, but then I will dissolve. If there's a little bit an approach to this fluid understanding of myself, then that is a way of taking away negative attitudes towards strangers, a fear of strangers, aggression to whatever or whoever thinks very differently, anything that puts my own idea of myself into question. All of that is the deconstructive approach. Now, today we are going to look a little bit more into the constructive approach. And that actually means building up any kind of attitude, any kind of thought patterns in which loving kindness and compassion is, first of all, fabricated, but then comes naturally and becomes second nature, or first nature. Maybe jumping one more time back to this cognitive analytical approach, that is actually talking about philosophy, about the rational approach. Yeah, rationally, we probably all agree, yes, it would be good if everybody in the world is compassionate, then we would have a better world. And many people think about this, train it. But why is it not enough to rely on reasoning alone? Because reasoning alone is not what guides us through life. Yeah, and there's an interesting experiment that has been done that I want to tell you about, and it has been done with students not of Buddhism but of Christian religion, and it's not to put them down. The same thing would happen with Buddhist students. It was an experiment done, I think, in the 70s at Princeton in a seminary, which means people who train to become priests, caretaker of the spiritual path, and they were told they studied the story of the Good Samaritan. Is that how you say it in English? Der gute Samariter. So there it is the idea of the learned people who don't stop to help the person suffering at the road, but then the Samaritan, who's actually an outcast in that society, he stops and he takes care of a person visibly in suffering. And so these seminary students were told, prepare a lecture, a sermon on this topic, and then you will be recorded, and you will work with this recording to improve your way of telling a sermon. And so they were preparing in one room, and then the recording studio was over there in the building. And then they were told, please now go to the studio. They are already waiting for you for the recording. And they had placed a person along the way, and that was the real test. Yeah, the person who was visibly in pain, moaning with something. And the real test was who would stop. And everyone had conceptually in mind that it would be a good thing to stop and help. And the more they put the people under pressure, saying, you're already late, go quickly, the less they were inclined to actually stop and help. Yeah. And so this experiment has been taken up in different ways to think about, so what is it that hinders us to be compassionate and helpful? Yeah, because I think when we are honest, we can all remember situations where there was somebody not drowning like we had it yesterday in the story, but when it is a smaller situation of help and where we didn't see it or decided to ignore it because we thought we had something more important to do. And the conclusion of some people is, well, what we need is more of a mindfulness training. We have to be, first of all, aware that these situations are happening around us all the time. My reflections led me to the fact that the mindfulness alone isn't enough. I think sometimes we see it and there is a hesitation to act. And why? Because sometimes it is simply because we are very much influenced by what everybody else around us does. Yeah, and that has been shown. Yeah, if there's in these busy subway stations and so on, somebody has something, breaks down, and people pass. But when there's one person who stops and starts acting, then a lot of people join in, and one person has some water to drink for the person, and food, or calls help, whatever is needed. Yeah, so that is why I'm saying this compassion culture, where it becomes the natural reflex to reach out and help, that is just as important as the mindfulness, the awareness, for building altogether a more compassionate society. Yeah. Okay. Question is still, how do we get there? If it is not only through thinking rationally about it, through this cognitive analytical approach, And the deconstructive approach is also sometimes maybe too difficult, meditating on emptiness. So then the constructive approach is something that has been developed, which makes it easy and accessible. And we've started actually already with it. It is easy and accessible because it starts with our feelings and emotions. So the Tibetan masters and the Tibetan masters, going back not only to Shantideva but also to Atisha, I will come to Atisha in a moment, they have developed a meditation that is called giving and taking. And they said, we took this inspired by Shantideva, therefore I put out the verses they refer to, from the Way of the Bodhisattva, chapter 8, we have, and I read, those desiring speedily to be a refuge for themselves and others should make the interchange of I and other, and thus embrace a sacred mystery. If I do not interchange my happiness for others' pain, enlightenment will never be attained, and even in samsara, joy will fly from me. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday, and that is what led to meditations that I call the constructive approach. So we have two big categories, we could say, and they have technical names. The first one is called the 7 instructions of causes and effect, and the other one is the Lojong mind training and its main practice, Tonglen. So let's look at the first one. And this goes back finally to Atisha. And in a way, the two are related. These are constructions in the mind. So in a way, they're fabrications, but they're useful fabrications. Yeah. In Buddhism, sometimes you get this idea, oh, it's all about letting go and not thinking and being silent. It's actually not true. That is one part of the practice. Another part of the practice is to train in constructive, positive, wholesome ways of thinking that replace unwholesome or just useless ways of thinking. And this is what is done in these 6 reflections that lead then to the 7th, the result, which is bodhicitta. So let's look through them, and I am confident that Khenpo Pema Namgyal will also come to the chapter. It's chapter 6 in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, where he goes into much more detail about them. So point number 1 is the recognition of all living beings as one's mother. That is maybe easy for you to digest or not so easy. It has to do with the idea that we are not just this person in this life, but life is cyclic. And this is just one out of many lives. There's a continuation. And in each life, we are born somehow from parents. And because of that, we have connections actually with all living beings, if we think of all of them being constantly reborn. And so every being in this room, in this world, has some time or another been our parent. And as a parent, they have been kind to us, especially the mother, yeah? Not only, well, let's say even the most awful mother who didn't behave very nicely with the children, for 9 months at least she gave her body, and without that the child wouldn't be born. So even that is a sort of kindness. Yeah, most mothers give kindness beyond that, give food, give education, and we can say the fact that we are here right now the way we are without our mother, it wouldn't be possible. And that already is reason enough to remember her kindness. That is the second point. Gampopa, in his book, he goes into a lot of detail to describe how the mothers, and he looks at Tibetan society, yeah, how the mother has to go out, look for food, strains her body, for the child, does everything for the child. And the child came into this world, it's like, a guest who doesn't have anything, not even clothes, comes at the door and say, hey, can I live in your house? Can you feed me? Can you give me clothes? Can you take care of me from now on for the next, I don't know how many decades? And this mother being says yes and loves that being more than their own parents, their husband, and anybody else. So if you think of that, it is quite amazing. And if it's not the mother, is another caretaker in anybody's life. Yeah. So step number 3 is wishing to repay their kindness, because then there is an awareness that despite all the sacrifice that this person gave to us, they got some kind of satisfaction out of it, but in the long run and in spiritual thinking, they didn't advance. Often, actually, they took on a lot of unwholesome thinking or actions. In Tibetan society, you also read then how they engaged in negative actions to feed you because they had to kill animals and so on. So all they did is accumulate negative actions, and from previous lives right now they are in distress. Our mothers, we have all seen them, not being the most happy person. So all of that together, thinking about the situation of the mother or the parent, the caretaker, we now think, okay, I have received so much, I want to give something back. That is wishing to repay their kindness. Therefore, then we develop loving kindness, the wish for her or him to be happy, and we develop compassion. This is number 5. The wish, may that person be free of suffering. And very important, number 6, make a wholehearted resolve to not stay only on the level of thinking, but really to go into action. First of all, that means meditating deeply on these steps, but also then in daily life, do whatever we can. And the best thing we can do in Mahayana thinking is to become a Buddha, because only a Buddha can really help other beings. Therefore, number 7 is to develop the mind of awakening. And the mind of awakening is the resolve to walk the Bodhisattva path, to become awakened. So this is an overview, and there are a lot of practices that go into these 7 steps in order to make you a heroic bodhisattva. I will switch to the Lojong mind training now, give you a little bit of a background. In a way, you can see the content of these 6 causes and effect that we just looked at. We will find them all in the Lojong training. But the Lojong mind training, and especially the 7-point mind training that you are also regularly practicing here in the center, has the advantage of being very structured, very clear, and therefore is a very easy and accessible way of training loving kindness and bodhisattva and bodhicitta and compassion. Okay, switching gears one moment, giving you some background. Here you can see the important teachers who brought the mind training to Tibet, and in that sense, even to us today, is first of all Atisha Dipamkara. We heard of him this morning. He was invited in the 10th, 11th century to come to Tibet. Why? Because Tibet had gone through a century of upheaval, and a lot of teachings were distorted. There were a lot of tantric teachings that emphasized sex and alcohol in the wrong way. And so one of the kings of Tibet said, we need to have somebody who puts the emphasis on ethics again and teaches us the most important principles of the Dharma. And so they invited Atisha from India, he had a dream of the goddess Tara, who told him, if you go to Tibet, you will do a lot of good. And so he went. He, as I wrote, Indian Bengali master, means he came from Bengal, northwestern India, and he had learned from Serlingpa, his teacher, Serlingpa Dharmakirti, the techniques of equalizing and exchange self and others. And this is what he brought to Tibet, and therefore he's seen as the master, as the originator of the Lojong teachings, even though he himself did not write any Lojong teachings, but as we will see, the Lojong teachings are actually like an accumulation of lots of pith instructions. It's like oral instructions that he gave here and there. Some of them were written down in his text that is called The Lamp on the Path to Awakening. And this text led to other Tibetan teachers digest them and putting them out in different ways. Yeah, Gampopa is one of them, and he put out this very structured path of the Bodhisattva. And as we will see, Chekawa is a Lojong teacher who took Atisha's teachings and put them into these 7 categories. Langri Tangpa is an important master. He had one actually very short text called the 8 Verses on the Mind Training, in which there's one verse that says, "May I accept upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory." Again, very counterintuitive, right? Because normally we want the defeat. Defeat is a strong word, but we want the disadvantages. If others have it, I feel sorry for them, but thank God I don't have it. Yeah, so that is the ordinary way of thinking. The victory, the praise, the gain. Normally we are quite happy with if we get it. Here again, it's turning around the ordinary way of functioning, and I offer the victory to others means also when there's work to do, I'm happy if the others can relax and if I can do it. And when there's blame, I'm happy to take the blame upon myself so that the others don't have to bear the blame and the responsibility. This kind of attitude, yeah. In retreat, one of my friends told me when she heard that for the first time, she said, "I'm already the doormat for my husband and my family. Why should I do that?" Yeah. So that is a healthy, normal reaction, and it really needs some reflection why it would make sense to think about changing this attitude. Chikawa heard this verse and thought, this is something I want to learn, and then learned the whole set of the Lojong teachings and developed this 7-point mind training. And there are also other sources, but we don't need to go into this too academic way of analyzing. In any way, we have only little time, so I'm giving you now more of an overview. Practice we can do later, or you do it with Thierry. So, Lojong, mind training, generally speaking, what is the purpose? In a way, you could say all of the Buddha's teachings are mind training, of course. Here we are talking about the Mahayana mind training, and the principal purpose is to train bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, and to enact the bodhisattva vow. What is the bodhisattva vow? Who has heard about the bodhisattva vow or taken even a bodhisattva vow in a ceremony? So that looks like it is new for some of you. The bodhisattva vow comes after a reflection about the usefulness, the meaning of bodhicitta, and is a way of committing to going this path. Why do we need a commitment? Because normally when we say I'm I'm going to be better, I'm going to do this and that. It's like the New Year's resolutions, and on day 3, we think, oh, this is too difficult, or I forgot. So therefore, the idea of taking a vow in the presence of a Sangha, in the presence of a community, and more importantly, we think of the presence of all the masters in the past, of all the bodhisattvas and Buddhas of the past, which means there is somebody who is actually watching over us, at least in our imagination, the presence of their own teacher, which makes us accountable, but also in the positive sense, encourages us. Yeah, because we think of all these people, like we heard about Asanga, 12 years in retreat and doubting. We are going through doubts, they went through doubts, but they carried on. So we can also carry on. Yeah. So that gives us a frame of thinking of ourselves, not this lonely being, but we are part of a community of beings who strive towards awakening, and we take a vow to make it stronger. So the Lojong teachings are there to help us do this in a structured way. And just looking at the word Lo and Jong, this is Tibetan, these are Tibetan words. Lo means the mind. Jong has several meanings. It means train, purify, and transform, all 3 of them together. In English, translators always had to choose one word or the other. So you see most of the time mind training. Some people insist that it is mind purification. It goes together, yeah. Purification, again, you have this deconstructive approach, the idea that you have to take things away in order for our natural, innate goodness to shine forth. And train is the aspect that, there's also something to cultivate in order to have the mind of a bodhisattva. Lojong, mind training, I said that also already, are pithy, short, essential teachings. The plus actually should have been equal signed. Pithy, short, essential teachings, and teachings that are expressed in slogans. For example, this one here: stop cherishing yourself and start cherishing others. And of course, then you have lots of commentaries and instructions of what it means, how you should do that. One way of working with these pithy instructions is to write them down, or nowadays you can also buy them printed on beautiful cards, put them up, and just remind yourself regularly of them. Another one would say, in kind of modern language, flip around neurotic clinging into a compassionate state. Yeah. So these kinds of pith instructions. Why are they important? One thing is, of course, they condense a whole lot of extensive teachings that you receive. For example, like right now, with looking at what Shantideva says or what Gampopa says, and by just having one line, all of that is activated. And another thing is, in Buddhism in general, but also in Tibetan Buddhism, it is emphasized that it's important to hear the teachings, not only read them. To hear them from your teacher in whom you have trust is important. And my experience, for example, with that, and you might have the same, even though you're taking notes, I took notes when Lama Gendun gave teachings. When I read that, what I wrote down there, a memory of my teacher and of that moment where I took the note is activated, and it means so much more to me than reading the same thing in a printed book, even though it could be the same. Yeah, but there is some personal connection in it. So therefore, the personal connection to a teacher and hearing from his or her mouth instructions that could be found in many books is important. Yeah. I see some of you nodding, so that seems to be an experience that you have also made. Yeah, how it's not only the words, but it's really hearing them and in a situation from a person that you trust. Yeah. Okay, here are the 7 points of the mind training, the preliminaries, which are the preliminaries that you already know, turning the mind towards the Dharma, thinking about the situation for which we can be grateful, having a body and a mind that is functional, being in a place where we can receive the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings are present. There's no war. We have enough to eat. We can really concentrate on them. The karma is there. We understand that there are negative actions that we should avoid, positive ones that we should do. Yeah, and all of that we know is impermanent. Yeah, so there are, in a more structured way, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. That is the preliminaries. Then there is the main practice, and we are going to look into that in a moment. That is the giving and taking. And the rest of the 7 points are ways of putting them into action. And the 3rd point is called transformation of adversity into the path of awakening. Maybe I will here now just tell the headings, and then we'll look at them afterwards in a tiny little bit more detail. The 4th one is explanations on incorporating the practices during one's lifetime. And lifetime also means dying. There's a way of practicing Lojong in death. Then there's a way of evaluating progress in mind training. Yeah, how do I know that I'm actually doing the right thing? There are some commitments, and there are precepts and guidelines. And here, commitments, precepts, guidelines, they kind of overlap, they're similar. Let's look at the main practice, because that is where we are approaching giving and taking. The main practice is the practice of bodhicitta. Giving and taking is a way of practicing bodhicitta. However, in order to do that, the giving and taking, which is part of the relative bodhicitta, Chekawa and the Lojong masters tell us, first of all, to practice absolute bodhicitta. And what is absolute bodhicitta? That actually connects back to what we learned in the first week about the actual reality of life, of myself, of others. And it has the effect of whatever we do afterwards, putting that into a context where we have an open mind, not a mind that fixes on there's really suffering and I really take it on me, and my happiness, I'm giving it away and then it is gone. This is all the solidifying thinking that we are normally involved in, which is part of the problem. Here with the absolute bodhicitta, it tells us, first of all, regard all dharmas as dreams, which means, like John Donne explained to us, yeah, examine whatever you perceive and realize ultimately there's nothing to be found, they're empty. The next slogan tells us, examine the nature of unborn awareness, which means look into the mind that is perceiving this reality. Also there is nothing to be found, and rest in the awareness of that. Then it says, self-liberate even the antidote. So even this meditation on the emptiness of the dharmas, the emptiness of self, even that analysis I have to let go of and just rest in an openness. So that is not the main practice, but it is touching upon an ultimate reality, even though at first maybe all that we can do is have a thought about it. But it's a preparation for the next part, and that is this relative bodhicitta, where it is said, sending and taking should be practiced alternately. These two should ride the breath. And the way we do that, we can actually train that a little bit in an experiential way. And that is similar to what we practiced yesterday already. Yeah. So maybe because already I talked a lot, let's take a moment of silence. Sit in a comfortable position. And first of all, just become aware of the breathing. The breathing will be our support throughout the practice. Breathing in, breathing out. Thanks. And we are putting our attention on the breathing rhythm only as a touching point. Yeah? At the same time, we also tune into the background and keep our awareness open. And in this open awareness, we are thinking of a person that is very dear to us. Traditionally, we start with our caregiver, our mother for many people, but it can also be another parent or a caregiver. And we develop a sense of gratitude based on whatever I explained before. So let's try to do it, and don't stay in the head. Try to go deeper onto the heart level of feeling this gratitude. And also try to feel the presence of that person in front of us. Let's do that for a short moment. So now with a sense of gratitude for our mother or for our dear one, loved one, I will say, there's also an awareness that this person isn't totally well off. Maybe is sick or just has difficulties in life, just like everyone. So we try to think ourselves into this person, thinking, what difficulties does she have? What struggles, what pains? And we are touched by that, we are resonating with it. And we begin this meditation here, the sending and taking. We begin that by now thinking of all our own happiness, good karma, well-being, and we send that and give it to this person. We give it to the loved one who receives it, and it dissolves into their heart, and we imagine how she or he becomes happier and happier. And it says, it should ride on the breath. So each time we breathe out, we are thinking we are sending love to our dear one. We are sending happiness to our dear one. Again and again, yeah, with each out breath. Let's do that for a moment. So this is a way of training generosity. We are giving again and again. And we can make this meditation also very concrete. We can think of, we're giving a piece of happiness that's abstract. We are thinking, I don't know, it might sound a little laughable because it's different for everyone, but you can imagine I'm sending a flower bouquet. I am sending cake and food. I am sending gifts, presents, just mentally, everything that is good. I'm sending praise in this way. Yeah, this is the sending. The taking part is going into, again, meditation, realizing the difficulties that person has and thinking, I can take them onto me. I wish they be free. I breathe them in and they dissolve into my heart. My heart is Buddha nature. It is emptiness. It dissolves everything. So let's focus on taking away the pain, the sickness, the dissatisfaction, the problems, big problems, small problems, the work that is hard. And each time we breathe in, we are imagining taking that pain in the form of black light or black smoke. We just breathe it in, it dissolves. Yeah, let's do that for 1 minute. And then once we have become familiar with these two elements, then it says sending and taking should be practiced alternately. So then breathing out in the form of clear, bright light, we give happiness. Breathing in, we take difficulties. And that can be done in meditation, in formal sitting meditation. And eventually it will become a reflex. So in all kinds of situations in life, we can just, breathe in and breathe out together with these thoughts. And as you can see here on the slide, slogan 10, it says, begin the sequence of sending and taking with yourself. So that is a meditation that you can apply, that we should apply for ourselves in situations where it is difficult, but actually starting in meditation, thinking of all the heavy karma that is coming our way because of what we have done in the past. Then we think, okay, all of that, I take responsibility for it, I breathe it in, but I also extend some tenderness, some softness, the wish for happiness towards myself. And we can practice that, as I said, in formal meditation, but also in any kind of situation that comes up that is difficult for us. It can become a reflex. Yeah, first of all, fully going into the texture of the experience rather than struggling with the difficulty itself in the moment. Just breathe in, fully accept what is there. To conclude, I just want to say one more thing here. Slogan number 9, as you can read, it says, in all activities, train with slogans. And so as I said, in the 7 points, within each of those 7 points, there are something like a subcategory, altogether 59 slogans. And there are explanations, there are Lojong commentaries about them, so there's no way we could cover that even in a session. Maybe one could do it in a week, but that is something that I would invite you all, if you're interested in deepening this type of meditation, to seek out explanations. Lama Thierry here is giving explanations regularly. There are also there are books by Pema Chodron about it, who has a very modern way of talking about it. And then we have commentaries like by Jamgon Kongtrul, the Jamgon Kongtrul of the 19th century, very traditional way of expressing it. And in between those two extremes, all kinds of different approaches. These are ways of familiarizing ourselves with this way of thinking. And once it makes sense, then through meditation, making it a natural way of reacting to situations. Yeah, any kind of difficulty can be approached with this situation. Somebody who is getting on your nerves, instead of making yourself hard and closing up and being annoyed, a Lojong practitioner remembers, okay, breathe in, and you breathe in the pain that person is in, just as much as your own pain. You breathe it in, you breathe out happiness, a positive attitude, and it gives clarity for dealing with the situation. Yeah, it's not magic in the sense that every angry person will be pacified by you breathing in their anger, but first of all, it is a mind training for ourselves. Yeah, it is first of all for ourselves getting rid of anger, because reacting with anger to an angry person, I guess we all agree that doesn't lead very far. By taking out your anger, at least you will be left with the clarity that helps you deal in an intelligent and wise way with the situation. Yeah, and those all are results of making Lojong your life practice. Okay. I will end with that here, because it's a lot of information, and actually this is